Hey guys. So we're going to talk about chapter 5 today. So there's really three really important things in chapter 5. And that would be we're seeing the evolution of Ellie's faith, or lack thereof. We're seeing the evolution of his loss of faith as the story continues. Two, we get to see another selection and kind of how he and his father deal with the idea that they might be separated. And then third, we have Ellie's surgery and them deciding to leave the camp and to evacuate, right? So let's start with Ellie's loss of faith, because that's the first thing that happens in this chapter. So chapter 5 opens with them talking about Rosh Hashanah, which is the Jewish New Year, basically. And it's a time for atonement, which is a time when you would ask for forgiveness for your sins. And oftentimes they did that through fasting, which is not eating, right, for kind of extended periods of time as a way to show their devotion to their faith. Of course, as Ellie says, fasting is really difficult during this time because they're already starving to death. So it becomes very, very kind of difficult. So they're having their service or whatever. This is on page 67. And Ellie says, "Blessed be God's name." Why? But why would I bless him? Every fiber in me rebelled because he caused thousands of children to burn in his mass graves, because he kept 6 crematoria working day and night, including Sabbath and the holy days, because in his great might he had created Auschwitz, Birkenau, Buna, and so many other factories of death. How could I say to him, "Blessed be thou, almighty master of the universe, who chose us among all other nations to be tortured day and night, to watch as our fathers, our mothers, our brothers ended up in the furnaces? Praise be thy holy name for having chosen us to be slaughtered on thine altar," right? So the anger in Ellie here is palpable, right? He is so upset with the fact that what he believes God is doing to him. And it's understandable, right? But it's just kind of crushing to see his evolution from deeply devout 13-year-old boy to right now so angry and so bitter that God has allowed kind of this horrible thing to happen to them. And I think it would test anybody's faith, right, to have to go through this. So he talks about how he eats. He eats his crust of bread, right? And how, so this is on page 69. "I did not fast. First of all, to please my father who'd forbidden me to do so. And then there was no longer any reason for me to fast. I no longer accepted God's silence. As I swallowed my ration of soup, I turned that act into a symbol of rebellion, of protest against him. And I nibbled on my crust of bread. Deep inside me, I felt a great void opening," right? So Ellie's faith filled him a lot, right? It was a huge part of his personality, of his character, of who he was, of his identity. And now all of a sudden, he doesn't have that anymore. So it's not replaced really by anything either, because of the kind of terrible things that are going on in the camp. So it's a huge moment, I think, in the evolution of his faith. So let's make sure we're charting that in our charts there. So we have the selection. Ellie's father has to go through a second one because of his weakness. Basically, he's older. He's not doing as well as Ellie was. I think really the important thing here is Ellie's inheritance, right? He talks about how he gets a spoon and a knife. And there's something kind of so heartbreaking about that's all that he can give his son, right? That's the only material possessions that he has. And for Ellie, he loses it right here at this point. He says on page 75, "All day long, I plodded around like a sleepwalker. How kindly they treated me, like an orphan, I thought. Even now, my father is helping me." He's so terrified of losing his father. So again, that's showing the increase in their relationship and the strength of their relationship as well. So that's an important one. Thankfully, his father passes both of them and ends up living. So toward the end of the chapter, Ellie gets an infection in his foot and he needs to have surgery. And it ends up going well, except that he has to wait 2 weeks in the infirmary to kind of gather up his strength and be able to walk on his foot again and all that kind of stuff. And his neighbors in the infirmary, one of them says something that is so chilling. It's on page 81. "I have more faith in Hitler than in anyone else. He alone has kept his promises, all his promises to the Jewish people." And it's chilling because it's so true, right? Hitler promised that he was going to kill every Jew in Europe, and he very, very almost succeeded. And it definitely looked at this point like he was going to. So it's this kind of ironic, but so true. So it's really what we call a paradox, right? It's something that seems contradictory, but has a kind of grain of truth to it. So we wouldn't really think of Hitler as keeping promises to the Jewish people, but he did for sure. So they're worried that or rather they know that the Russians are coming. So they're evacuating the camp, and anybody who's too sick or too weak or whatever is just going to stay at camp. Their assumption, and one that I kind of makes sense, is that they're going to be killed, that there's no way that they would allow them to be liberated. So Ellie and his father decide, despite the fact that Ellie has just had his foot amputated, or not amputated, but operated on, that it's better for them to leave and to evacuate than it is to stay and kind of meet with certain death. The vicious irony of that, of course, is the fact that, as Ellie says on page 82, after the war, I learned the fate of those who remained at the infirmary. They were quite simply liberated by the Russians 2 days after the evacuation, which I imagine is crushing for Ellie. That this is what happened, and it just kind of shows us again, going back to chapter 1. Every time Ellie and his family seem to make choices about whether to go or stay, they end up being wrong, right? Every time they make the choices to get to stay, they're wrong, and at this point, when they could have made the choice to stay and they choose to leave instead, they're wrong again. So it's just it's painful, really, that's kind of how that ends. So chapter 6 is one of the most, I would say, important, but also incredible chapters in this novel. It's beautifully written. It is heartbreaking as well. So I will see you soon to talk to you about that one. All right, guys, let me know if you need anything. I'll see you later. Bye.